The paycheck landed, and the volume changed overnight. A few quiet weeks can make a scandal feel dusty. One fresh contract can make the same scandal feel expensive again. Stefon Diggs just stepped back into football money, and that one move flipped the entire conversation from background noise to primetime smoke. A one-year deal with a ceiling around $12 million does not erase old headlines. A new uniform does not bleach old allegations. A fresh opportunity does not turn public doubt into public trust. A signature only turns the temperature up. That is the real story tonight. Not redemption. Not closure. Not a clean slate. The real story sits in the collision between new money and old accusations. The real story sits in a defamation fight that now looks louder, riskier, and far more embarrassing because Stefon Diggs no longer looks cornered, broke, discarded, or desperate for a call. Stefon Diggs looks employed again. Stefon Diggs looks marketable again. Stefon Diggs looks visible again. And visibility changes everything. Because once the cameras come back, every unresolved detail comes back too. Every receipt gets fresh oxygen. Every ugly rumor starts jogging again. Every old clip crawls out of storage, shakes off dust, and starts demanding a second trial in the court of public opinion. That is why this comeback does not feel like a comeback. This comeback feels like a stress test. This is not a story about a contract saving a career. This is a story about a contract forcing every contradiction back under stadium lights. This is not a story about Stefon Diggs finding peace. This is a story about Stefon Diggs finding a louder microphone at the exact moment a legal gamble keeps getting harder to explain. Look at the sequence. First, a major fall from a much bigger number. Around 65 million vanished from the previous picture. Then public mess. Then side-eye. Then stories that kept stacking. Then the legal fight with Christopher Griffin kept dragging the scandal back into conversation. Then a new job arrives. Then public attention spikes again. Same names. Same questions. Same shadows. Bigger contrast. That contrast matters because audiences forgive a lot of chaos when chaos comes wrapped in scarcity. A man down on luck can still collect sympathy. A man iced out can still collect excuses. A man waiting for the next call can still hide inside the phrase rough patch. But a man cashing a new football check loses that layer of protection immediately. The public reads fresh money as fresh power. Fresh power invites sharper judgment. Fresh power makes every aggressive move look more intentional. And that is where the defamation angle gets dangerous. Because a defamation play only sounds strong when certainty sounds stronger than doubt. Right now, certainty does not sound stronger than doubt. Right now, certainty sounds rented. According to the raw news transcript on the table, Christopher Griffin keeps pushing back, keeps defending the public version of events, keeps framing the legal conflict as a response to humiliation, violence, and retaliation. Meanwhile, Stefon Diggs appears to be arguing that Christopher Griffin lied, exaggerated, chased clout, and damaged reputation. That sounds neat in a filing. That sounds much messier in public because the filing does not live in a vacuum. The filing lives next to photos, interviews, timing, online chatter, alleged assaults, claims of retaliation, and one brutal reality. The audience rarely separates legal language from emotional optics. Optics are where this whole thing starts bleeding. A defamation complaint can say false statements caused damage. Fine. A courtroom can sort evidence. Fine. But public opinion does not wait for jury instructions. Public opinion watches behavior, compares energy, clocks inconsistencies, and asks a very simple question. If theft sat at the center of this mess, why does the story still feel murky instead of obvious? Why does the public still hear accusations, counter-accusations, and bruising humiliation instead of one clean factual line? Why does the explanation still sound tangled after all this time? That confusion is poison for a defamation strategy. Truth can defeat defamation in court. Everybody knows that. But truth has to look sturdy. Truth has to carry weight. Truth has to arrive with more than confidence and more than a social media caption. Truth has to survive cross-examination, timeline pressure, motive questions, and every ugly little detail that refuses to stay buried. Until that happens, the lawsuit does not look like strength. The lawsuit looks like amplification. That is the unique angle nobody in the sloppy gossip crowd is framing correctly. The contract did not rescue Stefon Diggs from scrutiny. The contract increased the cost of every unanswered question. New money did not lower suspicion. New money raised the asking price on clarity. That is why this story hits harder now. A man without a team can tell the public anything, and some corners of the internet shrug. A man with a team, a new check, and renewed relevance walks into a different standard. The audience starts measuring motive in higher denominations. The audience stops hearing desperation and starts hearing leverage. The audience stops asking whether Stefon Diggs can survive. The audience starts asking what Stefon Diggs plans to do with restored status. Repair reputation? Fight harder? Pressure critics? Outrun the mess with touchdowns and tunnel fits? The timing makes every option feel louder. And timing has never been kind to this story. The transcript points to another ugly fact. The public does not see this as one isolated accusation floating in space. The public sees a cluster. The public sees the chef Vila drama. The public remembers spectacle. The public remembers whispers about staged behavior, messy behavior, reckless behavior, and humiliating behavior. Fair or unfair, that earlier perception changed the lens. Once a public figure gets tagged as chaotic, every new allegation lands inside that frame. One accusation becomes a pattern in the audience mind long before any court signs off on anything. That pattern may be unfair in pure legal terms. That pattern remains devastating in reputation terms. And reputations move markets almost as fast as statistics. Football culture loves reinvention stories. Fans love the veteran with one more shot. Sports media loves a prove them wrong chapter. Brands love resilience with a glossy finish. But reinvention only sells clean when the audience can package the fall as misunderstanding, ego, bad luck, or age. This situation refuses clean packaging. This situation carries too much grime. The public does not only see performance questions. The public sees personal judgment questions. The public sees legal questions. The public sees moral questions. That mix makes every dollar look controversial. Now add Christopher Griffin back into frame. According to the transcript, Christopher Griffin has not folded, has not gone silent, and has not behaved like somebody scared of public scrutiny. Christopher Griffin appears willing to answer, willing to show damage, willing to go on platforms, willing to push the narrative into spaces where clips spread fast and emotion spreads faster. That matters because public sympathy often follows the party willing to show scars. The internet treats visible humiliation like instant evidence, even when legal facts remain unsettled. Once an audience sees bruising, hears a timeline, and watches a person defend dignity in public, the emotional case can outrun the legal case by miles. Stefon Diggs may hate that dynamic. Stefon Diggs may view that dynamic as manipulative. Stefon Diggs may view that dynamic as a performance for cameras. Maybe. But the internet rewards visible pain and punishes polished denial. That is the ecosystem. That is the market. That is the ugly math. So when Stefon Diggs, fresh off a new deal, circles back with language that sounds like Christopher Griffin wants attention, the public reaction can turn vicious in seconds. Not because every allegation is proven. Not because every claim survives court. Because the argument sounds emotionally upside down. The public hears a man with money, fame, and another NFL shot saying the less powerful figure is chasing shine. That framing may be legally strategic. That framing sounds socially tone-deaf. And tone-deaf is expensive in a scandal economy. The Cardi B layer makes the optics even rougher. The transcript paints a picture of Cardi B once acting as a kind of protective weather system around Stefon Diggs. Whether romance rumors, public defense, or sheer celebrity gravity created that umbrella, the effect was obvious. Goodwill can transfer. A beloved star can soften perception around a controversial partner. Fans who adore Cardi B can hesitate before going fully scorched earth on a man standing near Cardi B. That borrowed grace is real. That borrowed grace is powerful. That borrowed grace is temporary. Take that umbrella away, and the weather changes fast. Suddenly the audience no longer feels any pressure to be generous. Suddenly the audience starts measuring Stefon Diggs on Stefon Diggs alone. Suddenly every old complaint loses the celebrity buffer. That shift may be the most important social change in the whole story. Without Cardi B in the foreground, Stefon Diggs does not inherit softness from superstar affection. Stefon Diggs inherits scrutiny from personal choices. Public curiosity gets meaner. Public jokes get sharper. Public patience gets shorter. A new contract inside that environment does not read as triumph. A new contract reads as a challenge thrown directly at public memory. Almost like this, Stefon Diggs got the jersey back, but the internet kept the file open. That is a brutal place to stand. Because sports organizations care about performance, but organizations also care about distraction curves. One great week can cool noise. One bad headline can spike noise again. One shaky legal development during training camp can drag a team into a media swamp before the season even settles into rhythm. Front offices know this. Agents know this. Opposing fans love this. Tabloids feed on this. And if Stefon Diggs thought the New Deal would automatically change the emotional temperature, that expectation may prove wildly optimistic. Money can quiet certain people. Money can hire certain lawyers. Money can produce certain press runs. Money can buy wardrobe, travel, access, polish, framing, and distance. Money cannot force disbelief out of the audience. Money cannot order skepticism to evaporate. Money cannot walk into comment sections and erase instinct. Money cannot cross-examine a meme. That last part matters more than most public figures admit. A meme can beat a press release. A clipped quote can beat a statement. A visible contradiction can beat a polished denial. And once that cycle starts, the audience begins remixing the story into one cruel central idea. Stefon Diggs got paid, and now Stefon Diggs suddenly wants the narrative cleaned up. Whether that interpretation is fair no longer matters once that interpretation sticks. That is why the lawsuit feels less like protection and more like provocation. The transcript also highlights a point that hits with special force. If the underlying theft allegation is solid, obvious, and easy to prove, why has the public side of this conflict stayed so muddy? That question keeps returning because the public loves simple morality tales. Victim steals. Star retaliates legally. Case closed. But the public has not embraced that neat outline. The public keeps circling back to alleged beatings, alleged humiliation, alleged retaliation, and the strange spectacle orbiting the fallout. Once the public smells spectacle, the public assumes smoke. Once the public assumes smoke, every official move starts looking like spin. Stefon Diggs may believe that assumption is garbage. The audience clearly does not care. And the audience is not acting like a jury. The audience is acting like a swarm. Swarms do not weigh nuance with patience. Swarms hunt emotional coherence. Christopher Griffin has offered emotional coherence, public shame, public injury, public defense. Stefon Diggs, from the public seat, has offered denial, accusation, and a legal counterpunch that many observers interpret as overreach. That is not a legal ruling. That is a perception ruling. Perception rulings can crush public goodwill long before any final judgment. Then comes the simplest and nastiest question in the whole mess. Why now? Why press this energy now, right when a new contract should have opened a path toward discipline, quiet, and image repair? Why give critics a fresh reason to drag the same scandal back across headlines? Why let the comeback narrative share oxygen with the courtroom narrative at all? That is the move that keeps baffling people. A colder strategy might have focused on football, silence, routine, and patience. A colder strategy might have let the public boredom clock do some work. A colder strategy might have counted on short attention spans. Instead, this fight keeps receiving new sparks, and every spark tells the audience the matter is still hot, still personal, still volatile. Volatile is a terrible brand color for an athlete trying to stabilize value. And make no mistake, value is the center of this whole chapter. Not only salary value, reputation value, sponsor value, locker room value, media value, post-career value. Stefon Diggs is not only playing for yards anymore. Stefon Diggs is playing for future packaging. The next few months will shape how networks talk about Stefon Diggs, how fans caption Stefon Diggs, how brands study Stefon Diggs, and how every future controversy around Stefon Diggs gets interpreted. One ugly narrative can age badly. A chain of ugly narratives can turn into identity. That is why the public looks at this new contract and sees far more than money. The public sees a fork in the road. Either Stefon Diggs turns the season into a discipline campaign so strong that performance starts dragging reputation upward again, or every courtroom twist and every online clip turns the contract into proof that money restored access without restoring trust. And once the trust question gets attached to an athlete, stats alone do not always save the day. Look at how the transcript frames public ridicule. The jokes are not random. The jokes center on child support, old losses, failed relationships, embarrassing spectacle, and the idea that employment gives Stefon Diggs confidence to start swinging again. That pattern matters. Jokes reveal the emotional consensus faster than official statements do. Jokes show where the crowd thinks the weak spot lives. Right now, the weak spot is not speed, route running, separation, or hands. The weak spot is credibility. Credibility is hard to train in camp. Credibility is hard to rehab with highlights. Credibility is hard to restore once the public starts attaching the word bully to a name. And bully energy is exactly what a chunk of the audience seems to feel. A man with status allegedly humiliating a less powerful figure. A man with status allegedly escalating beyond reason. A man with status allegedly trying to crush narrative opposition through force, influence, or intimidation. Again, courtrooms decide facts. Public opinion decides aura. Aura is already getting mauled. That is why the comeback headline feels fake to so many people. No real comeback exists when the central wound remains open. A roster spot is not absolution. A paycheck is not resolution. A helmet is not amnesia. And a new team is definitely not a memory wipe for an internet that archives everything. So what would a genuine comeback even look like here? Not loud social energy. Not smug language. Not public grandstanding. Not trying to clown the other side while holding the bigger platform and the bigger wallet. A genuine comeback would require restraint so obvious that even critics notice the shift. A genuine comeback would require football discipline, off-field silence, and a strategy so boring that gossip accounts start starving. A genuine comeback would require Stefon Diggs to understand one painful truth. Restored opportunity creates restored responsibility. A new chance does not mean the audience owes applause. A new chance means the audience watches closer. Right now, closer watching may be the worst possible development for Stefon Diggs. Because the details that survive closest inspection are not flattering. The transcript suggests public skepticism about the claim that Christopher Griffin simply invented everything for clout. That skepticism does not come from legal scholars sitting in robes. That skepticism comes from ordinary people hearing a storyline that does not line up cleanly with the emotional evidence burned into public memory. Once people feel a story in the gut, technical arguments struggle to move the needle. Technical victory may still happen in court. Emotional defeat may still own the internet. That split can destroy public image even when legal outcomes stay mixed. And mixed outcomes are exactly what makes scandal stories last. A total collapse would end faster. A total vindication would end faster. A gray zone war with ugly optics and competing stories can stretch forever. Forever is terrible for legacy. So the real pressure is not just legal. The real pressure is narrative compression. Stefon Diggs needs one simple public story to overpower 10 messy ones. Right now, the simple story cutting through the noise is brutal. New contract, same clouds, louder ego, bigger stakes. That is the story spreading. That is the story jokes keep feeding. That is the story every fresh filing risks strengthening. And here comes the coldest part. The football world may not even need the truth to finalize a working opinion. The football world only needs enough discomfort to keep a player in the category of talented but exhausting. That label can shrink patience overnight. One drop. One locker room rumor. One legal headache. One headline before a key game. Suddenly the story becomes not worth the trouble. Athletes do not always get buried by proven guilt. Athletes often get buried by cumulative fatigue. Cumulative fatigue is the silent executioner in stories like this. People get tired. Teams get cautious. Fans get cynical. Sponsors get distant. Then one day the talent no longer outruns the hassle, and the market moves on without ceremony. That is why this new contract feels less like victory and more like final notice. This may be the last clean opportunity to outrun the label before the label becomes permanent. This may be the last chance to prove that football can dominate the headline instead of chaos. This may be the last chance to show that a name linked to spectacle can still choose discipline over self-destruction. But choosing discipline means understanding the scoreboard correctly. The scoreboard is not only touchdowns. The scoreboard is trust. The scoreboard is silence. The scoreboard is consistency. The scoreboard is whether the public starts hearing maturity instead of menace. And that scoreboard cannot be faked with a signing graphic. Christopher Griffin will keep talking. Comment sections will keep counting contradictions. Sports media will keep asking whether Stefon Diggs can produce enough football to suffocate the noise. That is the whole fourth quarter pressure point. Not can Stefon Diggs still play. Can Stefon Diggs finally move like a man who understands that every snap now doubles as testimony? Because one more explosion on the field can help the brand. One more explosion off the field can finish the story for good. Right now, the clock is still moving.